Alrighty, so for this section, which we're coming back after Dev 2, which I haven't gotten to yet because I'm a little in the future, as I always try to be, but I had foreshadowed, I had told you about this change I was going to do starting after the Dev. And just to show you, and we're going to come back to this, but just spend a second here, is that I went through, because what I did is I measured out in some very sophisticated spreadsheet, that's a joke, 13 through 17, the weeks we have left after our Dev 1. So this is the week. We're going to do 13 and part of 14. Next week we'll do 14 and all of 15, and then thereafter we'll do the hour and a half of the Tinker. So this week, as I started to approach the work, okay, so coming back here. So this week, as I started to approach 13 and 14, he was installing all these different libraries. And so I'm like, okay, so this is the perfect time to use what we learned already about setting up virtual environments, right? So if you want to remember, and you may have to, because I did, it took me a minute, actually more than a minute, or more than maybe I'd like to admit, but yeah, it's okay. I can be truthful. It's in my public directory, but you actually have a version of this too in the virtual environment, and it's called How To, right? So if you want to remember this, so I had to remember this. This took me a moment to go back and go, oh yes, I remember. Yes, that's good. Now, in this case, you're not deploying it for other people to use, but the reason you would do the virtual environment was so that you could isolate all the things you're going to install here. And if you want, get rid of them once you're done. Okay, so you would need to go through all of this installing, and then of course this part, and not this part, but this part is really about when you want other people to, you want to deploy your software out to somebody else. And I thought, well, one thing I could do is give you all my requirements thing, but I thought, no, it's good experience, right, for you to do that. So as I started into this this work, right? So as I started into working through this, and he was installing Request, a third-party module. He installed Beautiful Soup, and then he installed Selenium. So it was a perfect time for me to do that. But I had to remember, and I don't know if any of the rest of you, because I remember a couple of people stating when they were working through the virtual ENV that it was kind of a pain. So maybe what I experienced today was some of what you were talking about. But I noticed for me, first, it took me a minute to remember that I have to do Python when I'm running at the command line, and for some reason I've got to fix my VS Code to make it run like normal, right, when it's running in here. When I run the code by just hitting run without debug. But in this case, I have to run Python 3 when I'm running in a virtual environment, which in this case I just called it demo, therefore the demo directory for this code. But it took me a minute to remember that. And then there were a couple of times that I was just like, why isn't this quite working the way it should? And so I got through it though. So let me just say this, right? So as I went through, I did the web browser, worked fine. I did the request install, that did fine. The Beautiful Soup was okay, right? Had a little bit of issue there. But here's what I will say is I did run into several times where, like as an example, in the request, which one was that? Was it this one? Yeah. So this one where it said raise for status, that is deprecated now. Deprecated means it's no longer being used. So I had to use this, which was request, which it comes back from doing the request status underscore code. Does almost, I think, the same thing, but that's what I ended up having to do. And for mine, where he was trying to do Amazon, man, Amazon was kicking back a 505 error. And what that is that my status was coming back not as 200, which 200 is successful. It was coming back as 503. And I don't know if that's something Amazon's changed, my setup, or whatever. So for me, and you could try some other website if you wanted. I tried Fresno City, and then I went in and got some text just so that I could see that web scraping was working. So in case you run into something like that, do know that that's the case. I'm noticing this web scraping, and I'm wondering if I name that. And the reason I say that is that, as you remember, maybe as I go through and name all the files, oh yeah, so that one actually I need to add as well. So the point of my comment here is if you run into anything that won't work, especially on 38, 39, and 40, right? I recommend the virtual environment. By the way, I can't enforce that on your side. It's really just um, a function or a process to allow you to isolate the code that you're installing on your system, which I want to do for me. So do know that if you don't do that and you're trying to get this code to work, then you do have to install those modules in there. And then when it got to Selenium at the end, it really fell apart because it wanted me to do Firefox. And even though I had Firefox installed, it just had the hardest time. So I did a little bit of this. So I can't, in all good conscience say I absolutely want to see all that code. You can totally, and I could do this, just go back and write in that code. But honestly, and I'll just say this because I understand that students could do this. Like if you were just writing the code and not making sure it's running, you're not really benefiting from using your troubleshooting skills, right? Because that's a lot of what I did on this section is I did a lot of troubleshooting to figure out how I could get things to work, because your environment and my environment and everybody else's is going to be a little different. Okay. So again, I can't tell that on your side. It's really a step that you want to take so that you know that that works. Okay. So again, this is the one that kind of fell apart for me. And I just said, nah, I'm not. I watched it through. I understood what he was going to do. I understand controlling the browser. This Selenium library is built to require Firefox, even though I have it, still had a problem with it. So I watched it through to make sure I understood. I couldn't quite imagine where I would use it, but I know there is a use for it. So the other thing I did, and you don't have to do this because when you're, and let me say this, I put my directory, there are my section 13 and 14 in the same directory. And there's various reasons I did that. I realized after I didn't need to do that. I guess I was thinking when I did the virtual environment that I had to have it in the same directory, but I didn't. I actually totally could have put that code, because what matters is really here, because what you're basically doing, by the way, is you're actually doing this. If you want to ever look at your path, you're redoing your path. Maybe that's why I'm getting there. I should check that out. If you echo path, like if I deactivate right now, activate, right? And then I do echo again. Yeah, somehow my path is getting messed up. It is echo, right? So echo is a command that just displays back to your directory. And maybe I'll just kill this for a second and then bring it back. Then add back a bash and try it. There we go. So echo path, really what you're doing when you're doing the virtualized environment is you're changing your path. It's actually placing this directory into that path. So if you don't know that's what it's doing, maybe that could throw it off, because I noticed that seems to be throwing mine off a little bit. So anyway, what's my point? A little bit of a rambling, sorry about that. But my point is that, do it the way you want to on your station, but do make sure this code at all, if at all possible, runs, because it is really the point that you get to troubleshoot. Okay. So Like I told you, I put 13, 14 together. You can totally put them in separate directories. I put them together. You're welcome to do the same just because I wanted a virtualized environment and my head didn't figure this out until after that I could have done it. Still, in another directory, it doesn't matter where your code's at as long as you're running the virtualized environment from here. Now, having said that, once I got to the reading Excel and editing Excel, which also required another library. So again, almost every one of these, and I'm betting these two we're going to do next week do as well, require an install of some pip install. So I just think that's better to run it from running it um, in the virtual environment. That is actually, to me, it feels better to do that because I can isolate it. But having said that, I did run into a little bit of a problem with this one because some of the commands that it was wanting me, or some of the methods on Open YXL were also an issue. And so when I got to the right, I ended up looking them up. So do know that this is also a good opportunity for you to use and learn how to read documentation. Very, very helpful because one of the best things you can do is just be able to look at the basic documentation for a website. Because when he tells you, and I think this was the one, was get sheet by name. It was a different one. I played around. There was actually another command called worksheet, and you get the active one. But I ended up getting it to work. I ended up getting it to create the Excel file, which is cool. And then I wrote something to the Excel file, and then I got back the names of the sheets, and I got back the thing that I wrote into there. So that was cool to see that process happen, right? So that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see, that this code, not only are you coding along, and I'll just leave you with this concept, not only are you coding along here, you really should be making the code work. And I haven't emphasized that as much, mostly because I've been assuming, and maybe this is the bad part for me, I've been assuming you were doing that. And tonight I was wondering, I'm like, yeah, I guess you could just code this without it, but it's really not the point. Although it is a little bit of, you get a little bit of knowledge, but you get the most knowledge when you actually make this code work. So anyway, that's my discussion for today. You can put these in separate directories or put them in the same one. You can do virtualized or not. As long as I see these file names, I will correct that one on the web scraping where it was getting, oh, actually, I think I ended up naming it this, get Amazon price. Yeah, I think that's the one. No, I did that with City. Yeah, I did that with City too, because that's the one I couldn't get to work when I was doing the web scraping here. I couldn't get it to work for here. And again, I was getting, and if you know, I know I'm varying a little bit. Sorry about that. So I was getting a 503 server not available, which makes me think there was something, because I could go to it in the browser, but when the Python was making the HTTP, the get, that's what it's doing, right? When it's doing this get right here, okay? And when it was doing it for the Amazon, it wouldn't work. So, maybe in your notes, tell me, or somewhere, maybe out on Discord, tell me what your experience of doing that was. So now my job, now that I've done chatted with you, shown you what I went through, now I got to figure out how we're going to do a learn together, or what we're going to do here. So I'll give that some thought and work on that next. Have a good one.